November 29, 1944, Japan's newest super aircraft carrier, Shinano, set out as the world's largest warship, declared unsinkable and invisible to Allied eyes. Within 17 hours it was gone, sunk by a single submarine before ever firing a shot. Designed in secrecy, rushed to completion after the disaster at Midway, Shinano was meant to restore hope for the Imperial Navy. But hidden flaws and unfinished systems turned pride into catastrophic vulnerability. How could the ultimate symbol of naval power vanish so fast, shocking even the admirals who built her? The real story behind the sinking of Shinano reveals more than a lost ship. It exposes the fatal cost of hubris on the world's most dangerous ocean. In the aftermath of Midway, Japan's naval command faced a reckoning. 4 carriers lost in a single day, decades of doctrine undone by a handful of American dive bombers. The Imperial Navy needed not just a new ship, but a new symbol, proof that Japan could still dominate the Pacific. Deep within the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, the unfinished hull of a Yamato-class battleship became the foundation for this hope. The decision was made. Convert her into an aircraft carrier, something bigger and stronger than anything afloat. She would be called Shinano. At nearly 72,000 tons and 872 feet from bow to stern, Shinano would dwarf every carrier in the world. Admirals boasted she could survive a dozen torpedo strikes, her armor and bulkheads a fortress at sea. The scale alone was a statement. Japan was not finished, not beaten. But behind the steel and secrecy, urgency pressed every decision. The loss at Midway had left the Navy desperate for a morale victory, and Shinano's construction became a matter of national pride. Schedules were slashed, corners cut, and workers pushed far beyond exhaustion. Every plate welded, every rivet hammered, was a message to the Emperor and the world. Japan would not surrender the seas. Yet beneath this surge of pride, the transformation from battleship to carrier brought compromise after compromise. The Navy's faith in armor and firepower, born from the old battleship tradition, clashed with the realities of modern warfare. Shinano was designed as a floating fortress, but the rush to launch her, unfinished, untested, would soon reveal the cost of turning doctrine into steel at breakneck speed. Inside the Yokosuka shipyard, engineers and foremen watched deadlines slip into impossibility. Shinano's hull, built for a battleship's compartmentalized strength, was never fully adapted for her new life as a carrier. The armor belt met the torpedo bulge at a seam that looked formidable on blueprints, but left a vulnerable joint that could channel water straight into the heart of the ship. Shipyard logs recorded a growing backlog of unfinished work. Hundreds of cable runs and pipe penetrations left open or sealed only with temporary blocks. Watertight doors, the last defense against flooding, sat crated on the pier, never installed above the lower decks. As the launch date approached, workers scrambled to fit makeshift bracing over hull frames bent by a caisson accident during dry dock. Some bulkheads stood unpainted, their seams waiting for welders who would never arrive. The hangar, designed for aircraft, was divided by lightweight partitions rather than true blast-proof barriers. Survivor accounts and shipyard testimony recall exposed ventilation trunks and open electrical conduits, direct paths for water and fire to spread unchecked. Pumping systems, so critical for a ship of this size, were incomplete. Permanent pumps in the machinery spaces had power, but upper deck and hangar pumps remained idle, lacking wiring or even the pumps themselves. Portable emergency pumps, ordered weeks before, never reached the ship before departure. On the morning Shinano slipped from her berth, the crew carried lists of unfinished tasks and instructions for systems still under construction. The world's largest carrier sailed with her defenses untested and her lifelines unfinished. Her invincibility, little more than a myth. Archerfish's radar tracked the convoy as it slipped south along the coast. 3 destroyers fanned out in a protective arc around the towering silhouette of Shinano. Commander Joseph Enright stood in the conning tower, stopwatch in hand, charting every zigzag, every change in speed. For 6 hours, the submarine stalked its prey on the surface, matching each maneuver, holding a parallel course, always just outside the escort's searchlights. The tension inside the sub was electric. One mistake, one false move, and the destroyers would close in with depth charges. But Enright had trusted his calculations. He watched the carrier's pattern, waiting for the moment when the giant would swing broadside and expose her vulnerable flank. At 3:15 a.m., the opportunity came. Archerfish slipped beneath the waves, engines silent, and Enright ordered 6 Mark 14 torpedoes loaded into the tubes. The torpedo data computer was set for a shallow run, 10 feet below the surface, aimed to strike above Shinano's massive anti-torpedo bulge, where unfinished seams and open cable runs left the hull weakest. Enright called out the firing solution. The crew held their breath as the 6 torpedo spread raced through the dark water, timed at 10-second intervals to sweep the length of the carrier's starboard side. 4 explosions tore into Shinano's hull in quick succession, each one sending a shudder through the water. The echoes reached Archerfish's hydrophones as the submarine dove deep to evade the counterattack. On the surface, the world's largest carrier began to slow, wounded by a salvo planned and delivered with mathematical precision. The myth of invincibility had been breached. Flooding raced along Shinano's starboard side, slipping through unfinished joints and open cable runs that should have been sealed. Below the armored deck, water surged through compartments left exposed by missing watertight doors. The crew, most barely trained, and many unfamiliar with the maze of passageways, scrambled to stem the rising tide. Pumps failed one by one, powerless against the thousands of tons pouring in. Above, civilian engineers and shipyard workers joined sailors in a frantic search for escape routes, their lists of unfinished tasks forgotten in the darkness and chaos. Captain Toshio Abe clung to the bridge, refusing to believe that a ship of this scale could be lost so quickly. He ordered full speed, hoping momentum would keep Shinano afloat, but the effort only forced more water into the wounded hull. As the list increased, destroyers Hamikaze and Isokaze tried to throw tow lines, but each snapped under the strain. By mid-morning, the carrier was dead in the water, her fate sealed by the very shortcuts meant to save her. At 10:18 a.m., with the decks awash and the list past recovery, Abe addressed his men. He could not utter the words, "abandon ship." Instead, he released the crew from duty, telling them to save themselves. The evacuation unraveled into panic. Open hatches became traps, hangar shafts drew men back as the ship rolled, and the sound of collapsing bulkheads echoed through the hull. Many never reached the surface. Of the 2,515 aboard, 1,435 perished, sailors, officers, and civilians alike. Captain Abe remained on the bridge, choosing tradition and honor over rescue, as Shinano slipped beneath the waves. News of Shinano's loss never reached the Japanese public. Within hours, the Imperial Navy issued a blanket order. Every survivor was confined and forbidden to speak a word about the disaster. Official reports listed the ship only as Special Vessel Number 1, erasing her name from records. Families received no details, only vague notices that their sons were lost at sea. The Navy's top-secret classification carried the threat of execution for anyone who broke silence, a warning repeated in writing and face-to-face. Even among themselves, survivors spoke in hushed tones, knowing that guards and censors monitored every conversation. For months, the fate of the world's largest carrier vanished behind locked gates and sealed files. Only after Japan's surrender did the story begin to surface, too late for the loss to shape strategy. but not too late to haunt those who had been ordered to forget. Shinano's loss sent a shockwave through naval strategy that outlived the war itself. The world's largest warship, built to survive a dozen torpedoes, had vanished in less than a day, brought down by 4 hits from a single submarine. Admirals on both sides studied the disaster, weighing the cost of size and armor against the silent reach of undersea hunters. Post-war ship designers shifted their focus. No longer would massive, heavily armored hulls be mistaken for invulnerability. Instead, navies invested in better compartmentalization, rigorous damage control, and the relentless advance of submarine technology. The era of the supership ended quietly, sunk by the very weapon it was meant to outlast. Shinano remains, to this day, the largest warship ever lost to a submarine, a permanent lesson in the value of stealth and preparation over raw power. On November 29, 1944, Shinano, at 72,000 tons, the largest warship afloat, sank just 17 hours after leaving port, struck by 4 torpedoes from USS Archerfish. The documentary reveals how rushed construction left dozens of watertight doors uninstalled and multiple pumps inoperable, turning Japan's symbol of naval pride into a vulnerable target. Official Imperial Navy orders kept the loss secret until August 1945, and many technical details remain buried in restricted wartime records. Historians continue to debate the full scope of damage control failures, but the cause and effect is clear. Unchecked urgency and overconfidence proved fatal. Shinano remains the largest warship ever sunk by a submarine, a fact confirmed by naval archives. Today, the lessons of Shinano inform naval design around the world. Size alone does not guarantee strength, and in modern warfare, stealth and preparation outweigh symbols of power.